Hello and welcome back to your next IELTS speaking lesson, where we're going to be focusing on rhetorical questions. This isn't the most commonly covered topic by some IELTS teachers anyway for IELTS speaking, but I think it's important that we have an understanding of rhetorical questions and how they can be used within IELTS speaking, but also how they shouldn't be used. So we're going to look at really what rhetorical questions are. Pretty common, you probably already have an understanding, but if not, don't worry, because we'll talk about what rhetorical questions are, and we'll think about when we can use them in the IELTS test, when we shouldn't use them, and we'll take a look at a couple of examples too. Okay, let's get started then. Ever thought of using rhetorical questions? Well, this in itself is an example of a rhetorical question because I'm not expecting a reply from you. And that's really what rhetorical questions are. They're questions that don't demand an answer. Instead, they serve to provoke thought from whoever's listening, and of course also to engage the listener too. Rhetorical questions are a common part of everyday life. Therefore, they can be used within the IELTS test. However, when we use them is important. So, rhetorical questions are really something of an advanced technique for IELTS speaking. Not because rhetorical questions are difficult to use or create or think of, but because rhetorical questions need to be used correctly at the right time. And there are certainly some times when we shouldn't use rhetorical questions. So let's take a look at when we can use them. Specifically, IELTS speaking part 3. So this is where we finish with our cue card and the examiner will extend the conversation. It becomes more of a conversation. And there's questions from the examiner and we can give answers, express our opinions, and also engage the examiner more. And rhetorical questions can be great for this. That doesn't mean that you can't use them, say, in other parts of IELTS speaking, but to be honest, I would say if you're going to use a rhetorical question, and it can definitely sound great if you do, only really use them in part 3. Other than that, don't use them. It's probably best not to use them. So overusing rhetorical questions sounds weird, non-native. It's going to affect your band score. And also, like if it's a factual or just a direct response type question, did you enjoy living in your home village? It's quite a direct fact question. Yes, I did. You wouldn't probably go into some poetic rhetorical question. So, another area not to use them, you might be thinking, don't use rhetorical questions in IELTS writing. Lots of students do ask me this, and just in case you're thinking, don't use them for IELTS writing. It's not needed, they're not required, it's not that style of writing. If it was more fictional, if we were writing stories, we might use a rhetorical question, but not for reports, not for essays, where we're sort of exploring ideas. Okay, so IELTS part 3. That is when we'll use, or we have the opportunity to use rhetorical questions. You might be asking, well, should I use one then? And I say only if you feel confident to do so. Let's take a look at a couple of examples from a task 3 or part 3 situation. So here's the examiner in a lovely blue shirt. So what impact does social media have on personal relationships? Well, isn't it interesting how social media, which connects us online, can sometimes make us feel more disconnected too? And then I would continue with my idea. So I'm actually using the rhetorical question as an opinion opener here. I don't expect an answer back, and I'll build on this. But what I'm doing is introducing my idea. The examiner asked, what do you think social media does to personal relationships? And in the rhetorical question, I'm saying it's interesting that although social media connects us online, it makes us feel more disconnected. So I'm actually saying my opinion. I'm opening with my idea. Now, I would build on this. So that's a great example of how a rhetorical question can be used. Now, they're not the easiest to implement. So again, use them if you feel confident to do so, because it shows off fluency. Let's take a look at one more example. Do you think traditional values are disappearing in modern society? Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose it's kind of sad traditional values are disappearing, right? I suppose. So here I wanted to highlight the use of right as a rhetorical question. Now, it's slightly more conversational and informal, but using right as part of a rhetorical question can be a good strategy during part 3, because part 3 really mirrors a question-answer conversation type interaction. So here's another example of how I'm really introducing my opinion. Do you think traditional values are going? I suppose it's sad they are going, right? Disappearing, right? I suppose. And I'd continue there. Now, I've actually used I suppose twice, so I would probably change that. But the main thing here is just highlighting the fact that rhetorical questions can be used. Again, more of an advanced technique just because it's difficult to implement them at the right time. Okay, if you have any questions for rhetorical questions, jump in the Q&A section. As always, I'll try and get back to everyone within around about 24 hours, occasionally more, but generally I get back to everyone in 24 hours. So, speak to you soon.